G'day legends, happy Sunday. I hope that you're all doing well. Now, today we're going to talk about an interview from Zelensky, some attacks in Crimea, ammunition shortages up and down the front line on both sides. But as first, as always, what we'll do is have a look at the maps, talk about the situation at the front, and again, there will be some footage shown in this, which will be censored on YouTube, but the uncensored versions will all be on my Patreon for you guys to see. Now, what we're going to do, as always, the map. So in the middle, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kiev. Now, red areas occupied since 22, purple since 14, green areas liberated since the invasion of 22. Now we have Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, take note of Sevastopol in Crimea, where we'll talk about in a sec. But for now, we're going to come into Bakhmut and have a look at the situation here. Now, the date today is the 30th of April, and this map updated a few hours ago. So the last map update we got was the 28th. So let's step back and have a look. So what we have seen is right here in the center of Bakhmut, along this road that connects Ivanovsky all the way through. What we did see, the major shift was Russia push up onto this road, and some maps showing that it had then crossed that. But in the center here on that road further, we see Russia push in a second location further up upon that road and take more of the central part, as well as the grey zone moving across Kromove. And up in the north, the Road of Life here in Kromove with the red area right up against, and that will become more and more relevant as we speak forward in this. So what we're going to have a look at is this same region on the ISW map. Now, what we have seen is that the ISW can be a lot more conservative towards Russian gains, as it has a lot more of the claimed control and then assessed as the red zone. But the claimed control in the yellow is looking very similar to what we see from Deep State. So we have regions pushing up on this road connecting Ivanovsky. But what we don't have on Deep State is right in the southwest here, where it turns, we don't have this bit here. So this is why we compare multiple maps. But the center of Bakhmut, as well as the east side, the north and the south, is under Russian control currently. Now, we do have yesterday, as I released my video, like right as I was putting it out, a new Wagner map dropped. When I said in yesterday's video that the Wagner map in some areas shows less Russian gain than some of the Western sources maps, that was updated literally as my video went live. So what are we seeing? So of course we have Bakhmut in the center here. Now this may be easier if I can get a satellite map. Right, so we have Bakhmut, and as we can see, this is the city centre. Now, the lighter red areas with some of the blue, that is the city limits, and the darker red is outside the city. So you can see, according to this map, only a tiny percent, people are saying 10% of Bakhmut is actually being held by Ukrainian forces here, although we know that this is definitely on the pro-Russian side. But what it's not showing is what the ISW shows, which is down around this mixed statue here where they're crossing. But it has shown that Russia has got control of this road coming from Ivanovsky and control over most of the middle. So where this road turns out to the right here is where we see this road here. So we see both roads and these two here. So it's saying that it's closed off this bit of bracket in the middle, but from down around this reservoir here, fairly close, fairly similar in the northern part of what is remaining held there. But it is always interesting to have a look at these and see where this is showing. So I think, as always, the best way is Deep State with some of the Rybar maps as well. We don't have a Rybar today, to have a look at what is actually happening here. So let's just quickly have a look at this versus the ISW map, and it is showing fairly similar here. So of course the yellow is claimed area, but where we see this road, it loops around and one through it, this is where it loops around with the road coming through it, that they're saying that down amongst this, fairly similar here, and maybe through more like that according to the Russian sources. So as well, it is, fairly similar. Now, what we are going to talk about as well is this Road of Life. So this is the road coming through Kromove, and we see that Wagner are saying they've pushed right up onto that. In the ISW, Ukraine has taken back some ground and Russia isn't up onto it, but in the Deep State they're saying they are right up onto it. So that will become relevant in a sec when we start talking significantly about that. So Serhiy Cherevati, who's the spokesman of the Eastern Group of Forces for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which is the Eastern Group being the Donetsk region, Bakhmut, has talked about the Road of Life from Kromove that delivers supplies to Bakhmut. So this one through here. Now, this is known as the Road of Life. So he says that for several weeks, the Russians have been talking about capturing the Road of Life, as well as the constant fire control over it. In reality, everything is different. Yes, it is really difficult there because their attempts to capture the road continue, as well as attempts to establish fire control. But thanks to the soldiers of the Special Operations Forces, artillerymen, the Defence Force do not allow Russians to cut off our logistics. Heavy battles are going on, but there is no panic or lack of control. Everyone is acting according to premeditated scenarios. The situation is fully controlled by the General Staff, plus we see all the enemy's tensions and prevent them with fire. All this in a complex allows us to keep Bakhmut further. This is this road here. This is where it bends around. And you can just see the amount of shelling that has taken place in here. But interestingly, all these trench lines as well. So these are all trench lines. Of course, these are on the south, these are on the north. And just the heavy amount of shelling that if you see the trench line, that's where the most amount of shelling is, but also shells that have landed directly on the road itself. And you and I have looked at lots and lots of footage on this channel of shells landing directly on that road. So now we have a lot of footage of this road that we're going to go over as well. So this is the 1st Assault Battalion of the 3rd Assault Brigade on the Road of Life here. This is the Road of Life. Notice the amount of shell holes in it, and over here we see smoke coming out of Bakhmut. Here we are inside a vehicle with these Ukrainian soldiers coming up to clear some of these trench systems that were overtaken by the Russian forces. Now, I believe that is an M113 vehicle. You can't see the vehicle there, but I believe that is it, just because the rear ramp I used to operate on those vehicles looks the exact same to what we used to jump out the back of. Now we see dropping grenades on Russian positions in this same region. This is where, if you're not on the Patreon, this will be cut down. I'm not trying to sell anything here, but I'll just get banned again, and it's not worth it. So further, we have Russian soldiers in these regions as well. Now here we have the 92nd Brigade of the Road of Life as well. Now we're coming down the road here. I'm not exactly sure which way we are heading. I think we're heading towards Bakhmut. From here you can see the littered vehicles everywhere, and just the amount of shelling all through this. And then more footage of the Road of Life, and see where these systems are. You can see how that lines up to these trench systems zigzagging through here on the Road of Life. This is Bakhmut in the distance. Now, as well, we have some geo-confirmed tank footage, and these are Ukrainian tanks operating inside of Bakhmut. So this is from a drone here. This is the best quality of this footage that I can receive, and we see here a Ukrainian tank operating through here, firing upon positions. So I know it is very blurry, but you can tell it's from DJI. If you've ever flown one, that's how you know they exactly look. So we see this two-way road and firing on very close targets. So in this building and down here, this tank firing 3 or 4 shots from there. So we see them firing there, hitting positions in this building, just laying heavy fire. And we see just the smoke and the dust kick up as that tank has fired multiple large shells into that region. Now, this tank has been geolocated to here. So you can see it's on the two-ways road, firing into one of these buildings along here. So as you can see, right on the side of what is Russian controlled. So let's have a look again on this two-ways, firing straight into there. And as well as more geo-confirmed stuff as well. So this is Ukraine shelling Bakhmut in here as well. So we see these shells from a thermal imaging camera of Bakhmut. So this is amongst a few different types of geolocations, but it's all the general vicinity. And it actually lays very close to where that tank sat. So we see the shelling and then coming over this destroyed city here. And this is in this vicinity. So it's in Russian control. Remember, the tank was right here. So the tank is here. And this is when shelling in this general vicinity. So the first few shells land here and a few others are around back here. Now, I don't know exactly where this is, but this is Russian incendiary munitions through thermal imaging onto said Ukrainian positions. And this is very interesting to see under thermal imaging. Now, is this a war crime? As long as there's no civilian targets in here or military installations amongst civilians, its use of incendiary munitions is fine to be used against the opposing force. We've seen America do this in Iraq and Syria as well. Is it ethical? War is not ethical, and this is fucking savage of how this works. Is it thermite? Is it white phos? That can bring into the mix as well. But it's incredible to see this rain down, and this is a hellish weapon to use. We also have footage of Ukrainian Switchblade drones hitting Russian positions here, and this will be definitely censored. You have a tank being hit. But whilst we're on the maps, where we're going to have a look is we're going to have a look down in Mariinka as we have a updated Rybar map. Now, on this map, we haven't seen any changes over the last couple of days, even the last week in Mariinka. As we know, the Russia is posturing in defensive stance, waiting for Ukraine's counter-offensive. But what we're going to have a look at is what is this actually looking like compared to the Rybar. So let's zoom in just a little bit here. So we have the main road here. This is the main road. Now, this map is not saying that Russia have advanced, at least holding ground past that main road, where this is saying they're 3 or 4 blocks in, but have made a significant advance to the north and some to the south. So it is showing those advances both in the south and in the north, but not directly in the centre. Now, we have seen footage before that the centre of Mariinka looks very similar to like how Bakhmut looks, that it is just now a destroyed city brought down to rubble. Now, we have more and more coming out around ammunition worries from both Ukraine and Russia operating in the Bakhmut area. So this is Yevgeny Prigozhin in a very recent video. I appeal to Shogu. This is the Minister of the Defense Forces of Russia. Request for ammunition. Now, we've talked about a lot that, Yevgeny Prigozhin is a bit of a fucking memer online, that we don't exactly know how true some of the stuff he says. Like sometimes we're going to Warsaw, or we're struggling with ammo, we're not making any further, we're pulling out. So yeah, it always take everything with a grain of salt, whether you agree with what he's saying or disagree, whether what you're saying is good for your cause or bad for your cause. Take it all with a grain of salt, as I really do believe he's playing a lot of different sides in this war, particularly that he has not only political benefits out of this, but also monetary benefits of his soldiers being here as well. So further deployment of Wagner in PMC, Wagner PMC in Bakhmut, staying on. Talking about the shortage of ammunition and the situation and starvation of this ammo, as we've talked about a lot, that they're losing a lot of people purely for that. And this came out today, saying that he would pull out the forces. Yeah, saying it was yesterday. So he's sending it today. So they only have cartridges, bullets for days. March away, leave Bakhmut. This is what people are picking up and running with. So most likely to withdraw units. And some are pointing fingers that is why we've seen the Russian VDV, the paratroopers deployed into Bakhmut. But Prigozhin and his group Wagner are not the only ones with ammo problems and shortages in this region. So the BBC has posted an article titled "Bakhmut Defenders Worry About Losing Support," and they also talk in this directly about the lack of ammunition. Here we have this, and I have pre-highlighted some bits for you. So Bakhmut defenders worry about losing ammunition. So Vladimir and his men were firing all 40 barrels of their BM-21. It's a grad launcher, back of a truck, multiple launch rocket system. And now they're only firing a few at the Russian targets. We have not got enough ammunition for our weapon. And we know this. We know that this is more and more we're seeing a lack of ammo, especially for these like Soviet era equipment where that ammo was made in the Soviet Union or made in Russia. And this becomes more obvious when we start talking about book systems. And these guys are within Bakhmut defending there. And while the BBC is with them, they fired off a number of shells as well. So here we have that they talk about firing these, and we could have provided more support to our guys who are dying there. And this is known. There are soldiers dying in Bakhmut on both sides due to a lack of ammo. He says Ukraine has already burned through its own stocks of grad ammo. But Volodymyr Zelensky says supplies are coming from the Czech Republic, Romania, Pakistan. But he complains the rockets originating from Pakistan are not a good quality. Not that many countries operate those grad launchers. So then they talk about this in the shortage of Buk missile. Now, Buk is an air defense system that asked Yosef if correct in highlighting acute shortage of Buk. He said that is not true, but we haven't got enough. He says parts break and we haven't got spares. The factories produce them are not within Ukraine. So the Buk system is a very important system for both Ukraine and important for Russia to hit, has a tactical weapon system. And then they talk about these leaked documents of why should we be angry with Americans, because they gave information Russia had for 20 years. So information given to Russia that he was saying that Russia knew this for 20 years. But they say that they're already using weapons from the West, that they're using the L119 artillery gun, but they're already having to ration rounds on this, only firing 30 rounds a day. And we know some of the Russian guns are firing in the thousands. But he said, we have enough people, but we need ammunition. Ammunition is the most important. If we go on the offensive this year to retake our land, then we will win. But if that doesn't happen, then we don't have the resources for the war to go on for another 5 or 10 years. Now, this is where some people are pointing at that is why Russia is trying to extend the war. Is some people saying that Russia does have the military-industrial complex and the amount of equipment they made within the Soviet Union to continue this war for years, and that not only Russia could produce that ammo to do that, although there are high doubts about that, but people saying they could produce that the West's appetite for this war will diminish quickly. And he sort of talks about this. The country is exhausted, the economy too. This is something we don't hear about too much, but it is very true. We're also worried our Western allies are getting tired of helping us. Now, this is something that is being felt a little bit of everywhere, is how will the support look continuing. Now, the most support is from the US. That is really what drives everything. Europe will continue to support, but where the big stuff is the US. Europe can want to send a lot of weapons, but at the end of the day, if the US doesn't sign off on things like fighter jets, they are not going. And we've talked a lot about we have the elections coming up. We have Democrats versus Republicans. The Republicans do not have the appetite for this war that the Democrats have, which is so backwards when you think about sort of the history of those parties. But it's politics. People go against things in politics just to go against them. But I thought that was very interesting to point out that there are ammo shortages on both sides. Don't let anyone tell you different. Now, in this article from actually a Finnish newspaper, Zelensky has used it again as an opportunity to try and receive Western fighter jets. So as well, this is a Finnish channel. Now, this actually goes for about 90 minutes, the full chat, and it is translated. If you want to go watch it, it's on Zelensky's YouTube channel. I think it's the president of Ukraine, but some little key outtakes. He said it would help a lot, but we understand we will not delay this, being the counteroffensive. We will start even before we have F-16s or something else. However, as far as I know, it's not a Finnish decision, but it depends on the US. This is where earlier on there was reports, and it was just a translation error, that Ukraine put that they were actually going to receive Finnish F-18s, but they weren't going to, as the F-18 needs to be signed up by the US. Same with the Australian F-18s. Now, interestingly, in this as well, he speaks about Crimea. He says, of course, they intend to return to Crimea. Now, as we advance to the Crimean border, we see them withdrawing. They will flee faster than we advance. The same thing happened in Kherson. The people of Crimea understand this and join our forces. Now, that's the way he assured it. Now, this is a different situation. Now, we spoke about this yesterday. If you want to see me talk about this in length, look at my video yesterday where, yes, Kherson, Kharkiv, Kiev, we saw, Russia on the withdrawal from there too. But look at the defensive positions. They had very little, if not no, defensive positions that have been dug in for years, months, and in the fact of Crimea, Donetsk, that have been built in for almost a decade. So it is going to be a very different situation. I think drawing comparisons between Kherson, Kharkiv, and Kiev is a different kettle of fish all again. But drawing comparisons there to what Ukraine is going to be up against in Donetsk, Crimea, is really not comparable. It's apples and oranges. But here is some outtakes of this interview.
Контрнаступ дуже важливий.
The counteroffensive is extremely important. We need a success. I've explained the many factors it is dependent on, but I do believe in our servicemen. And, who am I to say that Russians will flee immediately after the beginning of our counteroffensive? It would be nice because they will have less victims among themselves as well. They also...
So he does say that the counteroffensive is incredibly important. Now, I would say that this whole war is weighted on these upcoming counteroffensives, and as we spoke about that last BBC article on the Western support diminishing or coming in droves. It does say that the Russians should leave before they come in to not have more casualties.
Need to think about saving their own lives. But actually, we will charge forward, we will do it. At any rate, we need to understand that the Russian troops are getting smaller with every day. Every day. The way they try to replenish by getting people with no knowledge of military things, it's not about military things or troops. It's about the people. They find it okay to lose their lives to the leader they elected.
So this is something he says that the Russian forces are getting smaller and smaller. Now, of course, Zelensky has a lot more information available to him than I do, but I would say that is seen as incorrect upon everything that I see, that the Russian forces are bolstering more and more men into the front line in defensive positions, recruiting more people, and throwing guys with no experience onto the front line. Well, it is not just Russia who has been seen doing that. There has been many, many reports and many people calling out Ukraine as well for putting guys through a few days of training, if that, and then onto areas like Bakhmut. Now, Russia may be doing it in more numbers, but both sides are, of course, doing that.
They are ready to do it. They are ready to stay forever in the Ukrainian land. Okay. But the regular troops are demotivated. There are some groups of people with motivation, but we do see and we hear it, how they lose their motivation on a daily basis. We hear how they fear us, how they do not want to fight.
There are definitely units that are demotivated, but say for the Wagner group, if you see some of that, they are highly motivated guys. Now, it is definitely correct that there are completely low motivated soldiers in the Russian forces, and of course you would be. It's not like the Ukrainian forces where Ukrainian forces are defending their homeland. If they lose everything. But there are definitely highly trained, highly motivated soldiers within the Russian forces as well. But I thought bits and pieces of this were very interesting. Now, of course, Zelensky is always in his sweater, his olive drab, basically army clothing. Now, initially when Zelensky's done this, because this has been since the start of the war, he's been in that singular outfit, and I'm sure he's got more than one of them. Now, initially, I saw this as sort of making sense as Kiev was, under siege. It wouldn't make sense to be wearing a suit. But then when, the Russian forces pulled back, I saw it then as unprofessional. But you've got to think further in, and that's where my monkey brain wasn't working. This is part of his branding. This is the same with, the cover of, say, Vogue magazine. That this is, all carefully thought out and choreographed on purpose to gain support, appeal to people, appeal to outside of Ukraine for support as well. And, it really has made him then become the most recognizable leader and one of the most loved leaders in the Western world. That said, when he visited the most powerful place on earth, being the US Congress, I don't know, if it were me, I would have worn a suit. And this is the photograph here of Zelensky in his typical green outfit with, of course, Nancy Pelosi in front of US Congress. I would have probably put on a tie for that one, but of course, up to him. And is it working? Yeah, it's working. It's incredibly recognizable. It's something you see, something people can relate to as an average person and go from there, although we know Zelensky's worth millions upon millions of dollars. There's been a drone attack on oil depots in Sevastopol, Crimea, down here. Now, the Moscow-installed governor of the Black Sea Peninsula's port city has said only one drone was able to reach the oil reservoir, and also saying there was another drone downed, but there were no casualties here as well. Now, we have some footage of these oil depots. Now, the most famous photograph to come out was this, as you can just see this black smoke spewing into the sky and up into the atmosphere across from here. Now, we have some videos here as well from the fire trucks of how intense this is burning. ABC Ukrainian news source has reported that Ukrainian military intelligence officials said that more than 10 tanks of oil products with a capacity of 40,000 tons intended for use by Russia's Black Sea fleet were destroyed in the fire. Now, Andriy Yusov, who is a spokesman for Ukraine's military intelligence, did not claim that Ukraine was responsible for the explosions in comments reported, but instead described the blast as God's punishment for Russian strikes on Ukraine on Friday, reportedly that killed 25 civilians. civilians. Now, RBC has quoted Yusuf as saying, "This punishment will be long-lasting. In the near future, it is better for all residents of temporarily occupied Crimea not to be near military facilities and facilities that provide for the aggressor's army." Now, this is a big hit for Crimea. And again, Ukraine has shown that their drones can make it there and hit targets. But I often wonder, what are the environmental impact of things like this? Now, I'd target these things too. Don't get me wrong, if I was the opposing force, if I was Ukraine, I'd be targeting all of this shit too. But a little bit like the Nord Stream pipeline, which apparently the US doesn't know what happened, when experts are saying that that could be potentially the worst human-caused greenhouse gas leak ever. Meanwhile, you and I are sipping a Coca-Cola through a paper straw. But legends, that's it. I hope you had a great day, a great weekend. Look after yourself, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never, ever feel obliged. So thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.